Hey, what's up? It's G or Gari. On the internet, you can find me at Don't Undersalt, either here on YouTube or on Instagram. Today, I'm gonna teach you how to make my kind of Mexican red sauce recipe. I love Mexican food. This one time in Mexico, I was sitting at a bar, talking to the bartender about the tacos I was eating. I really liked the red sauce, but the fish was a little dry. I told him how I felt. The gentleman sitting next to me turns over and says, "Excuse me, senorita, what do you know?" We got to talking, and one thing led to another. Turns out he was the chef of the establishment. He wasn't too happy about my review of his fish, but it got us talking about the red sauce. So, between that conversation and a bunch of trials and tribulations of my own, I've come up with my original kind of Mexican red sauce recipe. Let's get started. So we're gonna start with some whole tomatoes. I boiled these down in some water, let the peels get loose, and completely peeled them off. You can use whole canned tomatoes, it's totally fine. When I'm back home in America, I do that all the time. So you start with the whole tomatoes, some white onions, garlic, and red chilies. Now because I'm in India today, I'm using red Kashmiri chilies. If I was back home in the States, or better yet in Mexico, I'd be using Guajillo chilies or ancho chilies for this recipe. Don't worry guys, this is a lot of information to take in. I put together a little glossary of all the Mexican chilies that I use in my cooking and told you a little bit about each one. The beauty of this red sauce is you can pretty much use whichever chili's flavor you like best. So you start by heating up your pan on medium-high heat and hit it with some olive oil. You can use canola oil or vegetable oil, whatever it is in your house that you use. For this, we're using olive. Then I'm gonna toss in the onions. Everything here is roughly chopped. It's all going into the blender later, so no need to worry about things being uniform. I used white onions today. You could use yellow, you could use Spanish, you could use red, whatever onion you have on hand. Then you're gonna hit it with some garlic. Again, these are still full crushed cloves. Now I'm making this batch of red sauce for my nephew. He loves flavorful food, but he's not too keen on things that are super spicy. So for my sweet boy, I'm only gonna add in 2 red chilies. Right, so we're gonna fry these down and really let them get sizzly in the pan. The red chilies need to puff up a bit before you start incorporating the other ingredients. All right, now that you have the onions starting to get a bit translucent and your chilies are getting nice and toasty, we're gonna add in a couple spices. Now this is where you can really get into the art of remixing things. Again, I mentioned I'm making this for my nephew Aryan. He likes things a bit flavorful, so I'm gonna give him 1 or 2 pieces of cinnamon, a healthy pinch of cumin seed, and a couple sprinkles of Mexican oregano. Now you can use regular oregano, Italian oregano, whatever oregano, wherever you are in the world. That's the purpose of my recipes, is I can make them for anyone, anytime, anywhere. The original recipe for this Mexican red sauce that's in the comments is the basic version. I do give you some options for remixes, for add-ons. You can use whatever other spices you think might go well in this sauce. But today, this is my version. Now that the spices are incorporated in with the onions, garlic, and chili, I'm gonna add in the tomatoes. I mentioned before, I boiled them, peeled them, and now I'm using the whole tomato sans skin. You can again use canned tomatoes. It's totally fine, guys. Just gonna add in a couple whole tomatoes. And if you've noticed when I'm cooking, I'm not really measuring or telling you guys how much of anything to put in. I'm not really that kind of cook, but don't worry, I am that kind of recipe writer. So the original recipe that's listed in the comments will have all of the proportions you need for a certain amount of servings. You can use that as a reference. And of course, if you want to change your recipe around and you don't know how, you can always leave a comment, ask a question, and I'll get back to you. We're gonna add in a little salt at this point to help break up those tomatoes. And you just want to mash them down with your spoon. You could have totally mashed up the tomatoes beforehand. You could have cut them with a knife if you wanted. I'm really just trying to keep this easy, as little cleanup as possible, so I'm just gonna mash it in the pan. Really beat those boys up. All right, now that your tomatoes are generally broken up, again, you don't have to get them down super small. This is all going into the blender. It's gonna let them move around and get saucy together in the pan. Just give it a few minutes. All right, guys, now that the tomatoes, chilies, all those spices, onions, and garlic have really had time to make love in the pan, they're ready to roll. You'll know that they're good to go when they start to bubble up and you really see the oils from the masalas, the spices, start coming to the top. Now we're just gonna remove this from the heat, let it cool down a bit, and then whiz the whole thing in the blender. While we wait for the tomato sauce to cool down before we blend it, we're gonna go ahead and get our grilled chicken started so we can make some quesadillas to send to my nephew. So I have some chicken breasts that I marinated overnight in my classic adobo seasoning. I'm not gonna show you how to make that recipe today, but if you keep an eye on Instagram at Don't Undersalt, I might just share the recipe there. Get your pan nice and hot and hit it with some oil. Again, we're using olive oil. Swirl that around in the pan, get it evenly coated, and then add in your chicken breasts. I prefer to eat dark meat, but my nephew and my brother-in-law, who I'm making this for, they're breast men, so I'm rolling with that. So you want to start by taking a piece of grilled chicken. As you saw, I just made mine. You can totally do this with leftover chicken, leftover rotisserie chicken, grilled chicken from a barbecue the night before. Really, anytime you have leftover chicken or steak, you can throw it into a quesadilla. All right, so that same pan that we cooked the chicken in, the leftover oil is still swimming around. We're just gonna heat that back up and get our onions working. So I'm taking one sliced onion, just pulling it apart and throwing it into the pan. They'll break apart with your spoon, don't worry. Let's go 1.5 onions, why not? My nephew really likes capsicum. That's what we call bell peppers here in India. So I'm using a combo of some green and yellow bell peppers, thinly sliced. Now at this point you can put in whatever vegetables you want. If you like mushrooms, throw them in there. Carrots, why not? Really, any combo of fillings that you would make for your normal quesadillas, you're just gonna make it that much better with my Mexican red sauce. So you just wanna work the onions and the capsicum in the pan till they start to get a little bit brown. You really don't have to season them because you're gonna be putting some Mexican red sauce in here and it has all the flavor you need. Now that the veggies have cooked down and are starting to get a little brown at the edges, I'm gonna hit it with some of that Mexican red sauce. Blend it, just pour it straight in, and stir to incorporate. Now we're gonna add back in with our grilled chicken, one final stir, and this yummy filling is ready for your quesadillas. All right guys, now that we have the filling all mixed up, it's time to build a quesadilla. Now I'm not really giving you anything groundbreaking in terms of making quesadillas. You probably already have a quesadilla that fits your taste. What I'm giving you is this red sauce. It amps up the flavor of your standard recipe. Use it in quesadillas, use it in enchiladas, use it for a Mexican baked pasta dish. Really anything you want to add that Mexican flavor to, this red sauce will do it for you. Trust me. Of course we made quesadillas today. I made mine with chicken. You can make yours with chicken, with steak, with mushrooms. It's also great for enchiladas. A lot of times I'll mix it with boiled pasta or eat it over plain steamed rice. I'm enjoying the quesadilla today with my gorilla guacamole. You can get that recipe on my gorilla sauce video. Speaking of recipes, my original recipe for my Mexican red sauce dish is in the comments. Give it a peep, give it a try, and don't forget to tell me how it turns out. And as always, don't undersell.